The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Planted with Sara Payan podcast. I am Sara Payan, your host, and today we are on location at beautiful Full Moon Farms with Nik Erickson. Nik, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for making the long journey up here.
Oh, it was awesome. You know, it's funny because as we were heading over here, I was looking out into the hills and I mentioned to Jeff, I said, you know, every time I ride around here, I always wonder, you can't see any like houses or anything in the hills, but you know people live there and I wonder what it's like. And then we meet up with you and follow you out here and it's like, oh.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of us out here. You know, Humboldt County is about 90%, I believe, or more privately owned. Where Trinity County, it's just the opposite. It's all federal land, so it's public lands. And yeah, there's a lot of people hiding in the hills up here and a long history of hiding in the hills.
I
so
love
welcome.
It. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I have to say that for a dirt road, it was pretty smooth running.
You should have seen it in the spring. It was a whole different story.
Oh,
you had to park your car and run up the hill. You had to get around some big potholes in the spring. For sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the nitty gritty, first question I always like to ask all my guests: what was your first cannabis experience?
It was also my first memory in life. I was 3.5 years old. My father always had plants in his backyard, and they were mixed in with our vegetable garden. And my swing set was set up out there to where I could kick my feet through the fan leaves of the cannabis plants. It was always just accepted. You know, it was just part of the garden. I didn't know any difference between what was smokable and edible at the time. And I was swinging when the cops raided it. And I didn't understand, being that young, what was going on, but all these law enforcement officers were stepping on the food that we needed. We grew up, you know, extremely poor, and the food that we were growing for the summer was our substance in the winter. And I just remember them stepping on our food and pulling my dad's plants out and being picked up and going through the house, and they're taking drawers out of cupboards and whatnot, and everything is getting dumped on the floor. You know, it's just, you know, flipping the house over. And, you know, I look back and that memory was just seared in, I'm sure just because the trauma of it and the misunderstanding of it.
Sure.
I have very few memories below 5 years of age. And that was definitely my first and earliest one.
Wow.
But they had a bunk warrant. There was some misinformation on the warrant, so the charges got thrown out, which was good because my dad was a firefighter for the feds at the time, so that was endangering his job, not just his freedom, and everything ended up getting dropped.
How did your dad, as you got older, explain what was going on to you?
He didn't. From that point on, he definitely kept it hidden from me. That woke him up because we were in that era. I mean, this was 1978, so risk reward, right? And he didn't want to jeopardize anything at that point further. I mean, it was small town, you know, reputations out there. Nobody talked about what you were doing. Nobody, you know, even if it was just personal stash or if you were just selling a little bit extra to get by, whatever. So he definitely hid it from me. And, you know, there were signs here and there, you know, you could smell it once in a while, especially once I got into high school. But, on my 18th birthday, I moved out when I was 17, so I was already out of the house for a year. But I had gifted him back a little bit of green bud from Humboldt County with a pipe, and without any context to it. And from that point on, we were just, instead of like this whole father-son relationship, we were more like friends. It just kind of broke the ice. Like there was this unspoken. It's kind of, he never warned me against it. He never told me not to do it. He didn't tell me he wasn't doing it, but I knew he was, but the plants were no longer visible. He kept that was done from that point on. But after that point, yeah. And then we were cool. Then we were passing the J's.
Well, and how did you get into cultivation?
My first plant was when I was 14. And I actually got a picture that I can show you. And it was, you know, typical, you know, back then, you know, breaking up bricks, you know, from Mexico, and lots of seeds and stems, and, you know, just boys being boys talking about, you know, how to start them. And I popped one seed and I took it up behind our house in the woods, and snuck in on the back 40 of a ranch up there that had a spring. and grew it up, and it started flowering out. I had a female, and being young and kind of wanting to show off a little bit, I'd show a bunch of my friends and took them up and showed them my plant. And one of them stole it about probably 3 weeks before it was mature. And from what I understand was he microwaved it to dry it out. And that's how he ingested prematured microwaved weed. And I lost my plant. But, from that point on, I learned not to disclose your growing location because it was worth something to somebody else and they might take it from you.
That is a very valuable lesson.
Yeah. At 14.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, this land that we're on here, you were talking about earlier before we started recording that you started cultivating this land when you were 18?
Yeah. 1993, we've been out here. Cannabis was just something that was calling me. It really was. It was just calling me. I enjoyed being around it. The early 90s, there was a lot of kind of a romantic vibe about being an outlaw because we weren't criminals. We weren't breaking laws. We were breaking unjust laws in our eyes. And, it wasn't like we were stealing from people or hurting people. You were kind of the cool kid. You would come out of the hills and you'd have a bag of something green that didn't have seeds in it. And, everybody's like, how do I get some of that? It was definitely worth some money. So your work to income ratio was definitely offset compared to what we're doing with, dealing with right now with the industry. A little bit went a long ways, but the risk was very high as well. So it was interesting, but it was always calling to me. And, at the time, early 90s, pounds in Humboldt County were going for $5,200 and they weren't trimmed. You could count the buds per pound, oh, this is a 20 bud pound, and people like those big, huge colas that had all the leaf on it. And these, you'd take the stem out of it and you'd have a half ounce of stem and you're paying top price. And you could go up to Humboldt State and all the LA kids that were coming up to go to school, they were just amazed at it. And, you never even had to leave the county. If you had 10 pounds for the season, you could get rid of it all at Humboldt State and it was easy. And then, being young, you get to party with all the college girls and all that. And it was a blast.
It's like the best of all worlds at that age, really.
Yeah. I lived on campus for, over a year and didn't even go to school there. I just was beanbagging on a friend's sofa and or out in the living room and I knew my rounds. I knew when people were out of class. I would go to class sometime to watch movies when they had movie day, and people would trade their food cards to me and that type of thing for their cafeteria and it was a blast. If I had a good week, I would take a bunch of people out to breakfast and celebrate, and it was fun. It was a good era. It was a very positive era.
Yeah, when I started in the 215 days, I remember it was around 3,000 a pound then, so it had gone down a little bit. But and this was something that when I was talking to Judy, Walter, and Riley when we were at Soul Spirit Farm, the thing that I thought of coming from on my mother's side, my family were farmers, and I thought, wow. For once, a farmer is actually getting well compensated for all the love and work that's going into the cultivation of their product.
Absolutely. We're making up for lost time now with that, though. It's definitely flip-flop. But, there was a golden era. And yeah. I mean, as much as going on, we can touch on that in a little bit, but, as much as the negativity and the despair that's going on in the industry right now, I feel really blessed to have lived through what I deem as the golden era of cannabis, to where we got to live that lifestyle, and the community and the culture that it was built around was something really magical to be a part of.
Yeah.
And that's never going to be the same. And to have experienced that, just that moment in time, it was definitely something special. So, yeah. And I remember people like when it got down to 2,600, I'm done. Like, how do you make a living at that? Tapping out. Now we're fighting at like 350, 400 a pound.
I never thought I'd see the day.
Nor did we. Nor did we.
Yeah, and to illustrate that point, we were talking earlier about being on this hill here and how when you first started cultivating, you could count on one hand the amount of people who lived here. And then there was a time of, and I'm going to use quotes, green rush, because as you and I know, the green rush was pretty much over by then. It's just that other people had not caught on to the fact that we were
Sure.
shifting gears. How many people lived then and compared to now on this hill, or had cultivation facilities?
Well, I mean, every 40 had somebody on it, because
Yeah.
let's be real, at that time frame, pre-legalization, it wasn't like the gold rush where you got a claim and hoped to find gold.
Right.
Every claim out here had gold on it. All you had to do was grow it and not get caught.
Yeah.
So it was on you as the cultivator of how much you grew, how good it was, and could you get away with it. And so that opportunity was just too good to pass up. I mean, there was, and this is no joke, there was millionaires being made in months.
Yeah.
People could buy land out here at ridiculous prices and pay it off in a year if they were smart about it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of money being made, but leading up to that, when it was still just money to get by, we've always been stay smaller than your neighbor. That was always our mindset. It was never to, the goal is never to go out there and just make as much as you can. It was, hey, this is cool. We can hold down a job in town. We can do this on the side. And if we don't get caught this year, well, then we'll have a little extra money. Maybe we put new tires on the rig or get a new rig without fussing about it. You could go out to dinner more often. You could overtip the waitress. That money stayed in the community, because Humboldt County is isolated. We're 3 hours to anything. So our money was staying local.
Mm-hmm.
Local businesses thrived on it. They all knew where it was coming from. But, as where a lot of that money was coming from was East Coast, correct? So you'd have these people coming over from the East Coast and saying, hey, we want to buy this and take it back home and make our money. Well, they started seeing how good we had it. And a few of them would start staying, and then a few more would start staying. And then it just kind of started snowballing, and then organized crime and all that kind of stuff got involved, and it just blew wide open, and it just got out of control, and it got to the point where your risk reward wasn't there as much, because the law enforcement was taking 0.05% of canopy in their enforcement actions for the summer. So the chances that you get by with something, especially if you had multiple gardens, was very, very high. You were going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And that was unsustainable. And we're seeing that now, much like what's going on in the legal market, the rates of expansion and the surplus that's on the market, it's unsustainable.
Yeah. Well, this whole month of conversations that we're having is about small craft farmers, sun-grown cannabis, and why it's so important to understand how important it is and to be able to support that. And I think part of that also is the fact that with the indoor grows, the amount of resources that are taken, whereas as I'm looking here at your land, you've become a steward of the land. And everybody that I know who's growing outdoors takes that very seriously. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, indoor farm, and I was an indoor grower as well. And it was out of necessity when it was needed, because
Right.
law enforcement was so heavy. They were so well federal funded that when they brought the helicopters in, I mean, where we're sitting right now, we would be hovered 3 to 5 times a year. They would raid us, or at least come down and take our plants about every 3rd year. You almost could do that like clockwork. We knew we were getting taken about every 3rd year. And, you'd see everybody down at the store. That meant that they were on the hill, gates were being cut. And it got to the point where, hey, let's go indoor. And this is also the transitioning into really tight trim jobs.
Mm-hmm.
When we started going indoor, the flower had a different look to it, even the same genetics, versus its counterpart underneath the sun. And it had this better bag appeal. And all of a sudden people wanted to show that off. So now the trim world, the trim scene became part of the culture. And that was a whole different thing. But also the money became a little bit faster because you're having multiple harvests a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference with that is the risk was higher if you got caught, because you were a sitting duck. Your generator, your diesel tank, your indoor, they were stationary. You couldn't run through the hills like you could when it was an outdoor. You could get away from it, and they couldn't really prove that it was yours. So people started really getting some jail time out of the indoors also, and there was a little more with environmental fines and those kind of things. But it was out of necessity, but it's not a necessity anymore.
Right.
Now it's become an industry standard, because when you look at like investment funded grows, it's so based in numbers. They want to have it be to conform to the bottom line. And so if you have X amount of square footage of a warehouse, they know how to convert the lease per foot, and everything's down to, how many cents of, liquid chemical drip fertilizers are going in each plant. Soilless, it's always rock. And they can calculate everything out. So they can minimize and mitigate against a lot of other factors, and that makes them feel more secure. Commodity cannabis growers do not want to do what we're doing out here. It doesn't make financial sense to them. We're too far out. There's too many things to logistic wise they're going to added costs that they don't want to deal with. And our Blue Jays are sounding like monkeys out here.
I love it.
But it just makes sense to them right now, and I'm not sure if they're actually turning a profit or if they're just going for market share and brand building. It's still kind of a head scratcher to me, because it seems like there's so much kind of mid-grade indoor coming out. We've had a lot, and not just our farm. I know there's a lot of small craft sun-grown farms that do greenhouse, without lights.
Right.
And outdoor that get more praise for the quality of their products than what's coming out of these indoors. But, the big boys have marketing money. They know how to brand, and they've got more reach. Yeah. And they have bigger pocketbooks to withstand these contractions that we're in right now. So as the small guys not able to put food on their table, they can write it out on investor money.
Yeah, well, and also just to add to for people who are listening, there are craft growers that do mixed light.
Yes, absolutely.
And so there's, but there's a big difference between that and having, like, I'm just going to put it out there, a big warehouse in the middle of the desert, mm-hmm. where you're paying PG&E and you're also having to handle, air conditioning and controlling your environment. And before, like you said, things did have to be kept under wraps. That was a way of keeping yourself safe by bringing it indoors. But that's no longer what has to happen, except for, like, because we don't have interstate commerce. So of course, in a place like
Florida
or Alaska, you're going to have that out of necessity. But in a state like
the
California,
Matanuska Valley.
Well, that's true.
Mm.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. But, there are areas where people need to have safe access, and therefore, yep. in those cases, those resources do need to be used for indoor grows. But in our beautiful state, there's more than enough reason, more to step away from the indoor grows and to really look at that there's nothing like the sun. I mean, where we are right now with the beautiful, beautiful temperate climate and the cool nights, it must make for some beautiful bud.
There's something to be said about, maybe certain crops should be grown in certain regions in general anyway. California's been the breadbasket for the United States as far as vegetables and produce. The Midwest has corn, soy, and wheat, those type of things. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to force, and hopefully this is, down the foresight coming for federal legalization, that some of these regions don't, maybe they can make more money being an import state, and we can continue how it used to be, and California being an export state, and maybe they'll find new paths of to revenue with retail sales and the taxation on that end, instead of trying to capitalize and have it be vertically integrated from warehouse to customer in every single state. It doesn't make sense, and it's very limiting also. I mean, if all you have is an indoor choice, because very few commercial indoors are going to be soil grown or organic. So because you have safe access doesn't mean it's going to be the quality you want, or that product's going to be great for you.
Elevate your brand with iSpire, the global leader in vape technology with over 1,000 patents worldwide. Our innovative iSpire 1 simplifies your process with self-sealing hardware and automated filling. No capping, no hassle. For brands ready to go to market, our iSpire signature devices are for premium, customizable solutions. And as proud members of NCAA, NORML, the Origins Council, and the Women's Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, iSpire is committed to advocacy and social justice. Learn more today at getispire.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like when we talk about the difference between a tomato you get from the farmer's market and a hothouse tomato.
Yep.
It's a very different thing. And of course, if you're like in the middle of winter, a hothouse tomato will do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in the season for farm-grown tomatoes, why wouldn't you choose that?
Sure. And hopefully, I mean, there's definitely regions around us that are growing some amazing cannabis. I mean, Santa Cruz has been, historically, a phenomenal area. Mendocino, Marin, Trinity, all around us, in Nevada County, there's some amazing cannabis in California. We are lucky enough to be one of the, I guess, well-branded regions, being Humboldt. You can leave this country and talk about Humboldt and they associate it with one thing first, it's weed, not redwoods, and so they understand Humboldt, and we're lucky enough to have that. That brand was being diminished and tarnished during the Green Rush era.
Mm-hmm.
There was a subpar quality weed that was coming out of here because the commoditization, even on the black market, was happening. And I remember people asking me, "Hey, is this good green bud, or is it that rush weed?" There was a term for it. It was like, "Oh, that rush weed," and that's the green rushers coming in and just pumping and dumping, and hopefully we get back to hopefully we can get back to being recognized and known for what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us that are left that actually care about what we do and put pride into what we do. And we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're doing this for the end consumer. We want them to have a pleasant experience. We don't want this to be a cookie cutter, hey, buy one strain from 10 different farms. Everybody wants to give them something different. And if you shop from us one day and then you go shop from somebody else the next day and somewhere else the following, that's great. As long as your mindset is towards, hey, what's the benefits of this sun-grown farm? What's this experience going to bring me? What's that going to do health-wise down the road? It's kind of like akin to, walking into a beer cave if you like microbrews. Sierra Nevada was my beer when I drank microbrews, but you'd walk in and be like, oh, what's new from this brewery? Oh, what's seasonal here? What collaboration are these guys doing? And I would always try something different. And I would love to see that mindset transition over with the market with cannabis and just be like craft farm.
Yeah, because you don't have to be a cannabis expert to enjoy good cannabis. And I think the biggest disconnect that we're seeing in this industrialization of cannabis is that we're hearing a lot about cannabis as a consumer packaged good, and in turn the outlets that are selling it are getting more into formula retail, which is a huge disconnect from the plant itself. And I think it really is a disservice to the public for being able to experience what good cannabis is and also figuring out what works well for them, because everybody's different.
Yep.
And that's the one thing that I truly miss about back in the medicinal days when I used to work behind a bar. We would measure out the cannabis and people would get to smell it out of the jars, and you would get this variety of cultivars and people would have their favorites, and everybody was really different, and you'd see these patterns with what worked well for certain people. And also from like a professional development experience, the staff working with the buds and understanding bud structure and aroma and being able to help people navigate those menus to understand, like, they're matchmakers to create a good fit. And I feel like we're missing out on this amazing chance to connect with consumers, to help them develop what works well for them, to have them have a full enjoyment of the plant.
The data can definitely be overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even to seasoned farmers, we learn every day. There's no expertise out here. We make mistakes every day. We learn new lessons every day, and good because it would be boring without it. But since legalization, science, I always say science has made us better farmers. It's making better consumers, but there's so much science and so much data coming out, and it's progressing so quickly. The average consumer doesn't want to keep up, and that's kind of where it fell back to. They'd walk in and they'd understand one thing: THC percentage. Okay, what's the highest THC percentage? That must get me the highest. Putting all their flavor and effects and all that kind of stuff to the side. And then where's the lowest price point? I want the most for the least, and that's kind of the market that we've been dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody's so diverse, like you were saying. Everybody has individualist taste, and we need to cater to that, because how boring would it be to walk into a store and only have 5 choices, And thank God we're not all the same. I mean, personalities are different for a reason, right? And that's what makes us all interesting. And our backstories. Well, cannabis has a backstory, and there's so many things that can make it interesting. And even if you're talking about the same cultivar, like, you've been all over this county visiting some amazing regions. Each one of those regions can grow the same cultivar differently.
Yeah.
And all the farmers can grow that cultivar differently. Their inputs, their aspects, their elevations, their terroir, the soil, their feeding regimens, all these things can bring out, different terpenes can be, minor terpenes can become predominant terpenes in the same exact genetics. And we've seen this down the road from here. We have 2 different gardens that are 2 miles apart, and the same exact cultivars grow differently and have different flavor profiles 2 miles apart. And it's the coastal region versus this kind of a cusp on the arid inland region where it meets that coastal region. And the night temperatures are different. The daytime temperatures are different. Wind factors to help keep the plants cooler during the day, those type of things, moisture levels, all this has an effect, whether it's in native soil, whether you're importing soil, even if it's organic soil, all these different things have different effects on it. And it's dynamic, and it's very, very parallel to the craft wine industry.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking about that. That was a couple years ago. I had Phil Couturi on the show, and the New York Times calls him the Wizard of Green, because he is basically the godfather of organic and biodynamic grape growing. And he also, for personal consumption, grows some pretty lovely weed. But we were talking about just like terroir, and just the fact that, like, having the plants outside and everything that they're affected by nature changes the way the plants express themselves, and that is, that translates into flavor with the grapes.
Absolutely.
And so we see that with cannabis as well.
Absolutely. Did you have a hot summer? Did you have a mild summer? Was it a short summer, a long summer? Was it smoky? All these things are going to have an effect on both crops.
Mm-hmm.
And there really are parallels with the wine industry as far as even problems, pests and molds and those type of things they're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
Harvest cycles are pretty much on cue with each other. And that customer base should be our first kind of target market. They're already educated to the nuances of wine. And that should honestly be the easy sell, the easy transition for the craft market. But we don't have access to those guys, and they don't have access to us. A lot of those people don't want to go, stand in line at a dispensary and have a 20-something-year-old try to pitch them the hottest, latest fad strain. So we need more direct to consumer sales. We need to be able to reach directly to our consumer and get that feedback, that one-on-one feedback. So it's not faceless.
Yeah.
Because this industry has become pretty faceless, soulless. It's not gone forever. I think we can come out of it. But right now we're in this kind of contraction market where what we do as far as craft cannabis and the commodity market have merged. We're all swimming in the same pool. And we know there's people that want craft flower, and we just got to be able to connect those dots to be able to survive.
Yeah, well, I think that the commodity market is a lazy market, and because those are the same people that say cannabis sells itself, and then they wonder why their sales are so low, but they're missing this huge swath of people that may not have even been turned on to the benefits of a good match with cannabis that would work well for them. And for our listeners, will you explain to them the benefits? What is the differentiator with craft grown, sun-grown cannabis?
Oh, there's not any just one point, but I mean,
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah, let's just start out with some basics of like basic intent, purpose. Putting your love into something versus chasing the dollar. How you work with your land, the positive environmental impact. Everything we do here is we have we can take a tour here in a little bit and show you. It's all rain catchment water. We catch our water for irrigation in the wintertime, off of our roof lines into rain catchment tanks. Not using chemical pesticides and fertilizers. You look at a lot of the commodity farms that are down in central California right now, they're dealing with legacy pesticide and fertilizer issues that's in the soil, that's in the water, these forever chemicals that you can't erase, but they're there because they took over some other crop that was, that had previously, been on that farm or that land and farmed in such a manner that, it's going to leave something behind that's detrimental to cannabis. Cannabis uptakes, it's a cleaner, it detoxifies soil. It wants to take things up. Well, where's that going to go? It's going to go into the flower. And maybe it doesn't test negative in the flower form it's in low enough quantities to where you don't see it at the labs in flower, but you go to concentrate or you add heat to it, and a lot of the stuff's carcinogenic with flame, with temperature. So, you go spark a joint, now it's got a problem.
That's an interesting point because I know, like, especially, like right around Salinas and stuff, there were a lot of places where they were growing cut flowers before. So that's agriculture that's not grown for consumption.
Right.
And so there's a difference in what's being used to grow it.
Well, you can be downwind from an organic broccoli farm, and what they're allowed to spray on organic produce doesn't fly for cannabis because it's an inhalant. So you'll test negative for organic sprays for produce for sure.
Wow. That just blows my mind to think about.
Our cannabis is by far cleaner than our food supply. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and then, it seems like a lot of the testing and everything that's done with the land and with water and all the different things is more stringent than growing organic vegetables.
Yes. Yes. I've had 8 inspections this year. 5 counties, different licenses, 5 counties, the DCC, Fish and Wildlife. I've got metal culverts with rock armoring on my 4-wheeler trails. We are so sediment sensitive. Like, we're above the upper reaches of the Mad River right now. This is spawning grounds for salmon. We're conscious of all these things. So, what they make us do, and we're fixing legacy issues also. If you buy a piece of land out here, the requirements are maybe you're repairing something that was done 50 years ago that was okay, at that time period. Well, now they want it upgraded or they want something fixed. This is coming out of the farmer's pocket. We're not backed by any form of big investment. This is all coming out of our bottom line. And there's not much of a bottom line right now for farms. And that's, sadly, we're watching a lot of really, really quality farms leave. Our community is shrinking right now. And the economics of it are being felt, across the county, all businesses. A lot of the ancillary businesses that we've talked to are down 60% or more. The trickle down taxes to the county are definitely being felt. We're experiencing a property value crash right now. The bubble's definitely popped, and the county's kind of scratching its head going, what to do now?
Yeah. And, when we look at this, like, what are some of the biggest problems that are creating all this turmoil?
Again, death by 1,000 cuts. There's so much going on. Nothing's stable. Nobody's can accurately predict next year. And when you watch the big companies that have money to play with, it's so much easier to spend somebody else's money and make mistakes. And they jump in. If there's $1 to be made somewhere, it gets exploited so quickly that becomes non-profitable. And we've just been kind of pushed to the side. All these small mom and pop farms that actually built this industry, that came out of culture and legacy and cared about what they were doing, are just kind of being stepped on by these behemoths as they just run rampant on the market, but they're not making any ground. They're imploding one day and then a new one's starts up the next day. And we kind of talked about this earlier off air. It's just there's no real true brand loyalty right now, because you wake up and 5 of the major brands that you knew are gone and 5 new ones have taken their place. And and we're in the middle of this trying to make a name for ourselves. And, it's a lot of work to build a brand, and it's a lot of money to build a brand to properly do it. And so what we're seeing is a lot of synergy between farms kind of joining together. Like I'm part of, the Humboldt family farms, and it's kind of like a co-op style of like-minded farms that all have the same ethos, what they're doing down there at Redwood Roots and Green Ox and some of these local distros that are really supporting small craft farmers and really trying to just get synergy in numbers. Because there isn't a big funding pool behind them. So it's just trying to stay true to the roots of it all and being authentic and hoping people hear that message, that it's real, that there's something behind it. It's not just forced sales pitch where, we're not pushing anything on anybody. We want them to gravitate towards us because it's the magnets align.
Yeah, it's heartening to know that there are distro models that support the community.
Yeah.
Because as you've seen in the past few years, especially with like things like herbal going into receivership and different things that have happened with companies, it doesn't just affect that company.
Mm-hmm.
It affects entire communities of companies.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the brand loyalty, I feel like the consumer, in some ways, if they've been around for a while, they almost have brand PTSD because they become attached to something. It's gone. They have to, and for those of you listening, if you've ever I know probably a lot of you haven't spent time behind a bar, but cannabis is a very personal, emotional thing for people who are using it regularly. And so when something that you like is gone, you're looking frantically for something else to replace it with, because we all like our familiarity. And this goes with anything that we're doing, whether it's, a non-cannabis beverage to our favorite, person that we see at the farmer's market. And when that's gone, there's this gap, there's this loss. And when consumers go through that over and over again, it's like, how can they be expected to have favorite brands that they remain loyal to when they see the chaos that's going on in our industry?
And with California, the price points, the taxation, I mean, at the retail level versus like what's going on in Minnesota, I think they're like 16% tax and no purchase cap. I mean, we have a 1 ounce purchase cap. So their market's thriving. They're outselling California. Why is that?
Yeah. And Michigan too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it shouldn't, we need to have a better balance we need to be talking to the people who are creating this policy and getting them to understand it's a business like any other, but then also taking a bigger step. Like when I first started in this industry, I used to think about the possibilities. Like I came from civil rights. And so for me, a lot of things were about social justice, but also looking at the way that we could do business in a different way. Like we could, because we were working with plants and it was cultivation, it's work, a business with conscience, with, the, how would you say it? Yeah, conscious capitalism, like compassionate capitalism, where we're like what we were seeing before legalization, where like you were mentioning, the money that was coming out of cannabis in Humboldt was staying in Humboldt and supporting that community. Whereas when we're looking at these larger outfits, it's not staying in the communities.
No.
And quite honestly, it's in some cases, it's just being eaten up by the greedy guts of how many different companies can we accumulate. And then we realize there's no liquidity. So then all these people who have been dedicated to it lose their jobs.
Yep. Grass door.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember what their total number was of payables owed that got, it's like 7 million or something. I mean, these, the ripple effects on small farms that count on that. I mean, there's no teeth in it for farmers as far as like, how do we get actually paid when products go down the food chain? Because a lot of times, distros don't have the funding to cover you. It's kind of just like that double front, like on the traditional market, you never double front something out, because something happens, you're on the line for it, but
right.
there's no recourse. And for this to work, I mean, we all kind of have to trust each other. And so you front it to one person, they front it down to the retail level. And then you hope that everybody's doing their job, to sell your flower, to promote your flower? Are you hitting the store's shelves and just being pushed to the side because they were being paid to promote somebody else? So that means, as small farmers, we got a lot of face time. You got to be in store. You got to be talking to the consumers. It's one-on-one interaction, which is very hard to do when you're supposed to be on the farm taking care of the plants. We can't hire people to go down there and be the face of the farm for us. And if you did, are they really representing you correctly? And there's so many factors to it. The small grassroots movement has a lot of hurdles that the general public doesn't see. But I can tell you that, there is still a lot of good people doing good things with this plant, and there's good product to be had out there, and it's not, double the price. You're not paying up for this like you would if you go, buy organic steaks or vegetables at the store versus non. It's like you go to the store anymore. It's like, oh, you want your food without poison? Well, we're gonna have to pay. You have to pay a little extra for that. That's not us. We're very, price conscious, and we're doing this for the end consumer. We're not doing it for all the middlemen that are in here. And just trying to survive. I mean, it's definitely just a 7-day-a-week job now. And I really feel for a lot of my friends and people that I consider family that are in this industry that are struggling like we are. I mean, we're not immune to it by any means. And we've said goodbye to people last year, and we've had people reach out to us this year going, hey, this is our last year also. And when they're gone, we're losing decades of experience. We're losing somebody that really knew what they were doing, and who's going to fill that gap?
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. I mean, and also, how many people will be along to pass on the knowledge to the next generations of growers as well. In the retail environment, what are you seeing as far as, I know when I was working in dispensary, there was a time where there were slotting fees. They were becoming more popular. Are you seeing that happening as much now, or I feel like there's been some second thoughts around that as far as like trying to create more sustainability and like kind of share the love as far as.
Well,
sales?
I think how it goes back to grassroots. We're winning with the hearts and minds at the bud tender level. I mean, we have bud tenders that are like, we don't smoke our house brand. We'll smoke yours. And if that's what they're taking home, then they're definitely going to, genuinely heartfeltly put your name out there and say, hey, no, check this out. And you have to do that. You have to do that. It's a slow process. It's not, I mean, we're in a bunch of stores, and it's not like we're selling a lot of cannabis right now. Pre-rolls are a number one seller right now. Edibles, and vapes. We don't do vapes, but those are the three things that consumers are looking for. And it's kind of the ease of, right? We go back to, the intimacy of the flower. Well, there's something to be said about that shared experience of sitting down, breaking out a flower, getting your grinder out, grinding, smelling, rolling. It takes time. There's a process to it. It's a little ritual, like making French press coffee in the morning, something that you're going to enjoy. A lot of people have kind of gotten away from that. We're in such a, impatient society at this point. Everything's a click away. We're just, scroll fest on Instagram or social media or whatever. Everything's so immediate. We want food delivered to our door. We don't want to go wait in line. We want all this stuff fast. And it's kind of that attitude's kind of transitioning into how consumers purchase right now. And I don't really have an answer to that on how craft farms are going to navigate this one, because there's only so much flour you can put into pre-rolls or into edibles, those type of things. And edibles are one of those things that you can grow an inferior product and upscale your end product by turning it into an edible. So you can have bad flour and make a really nice edible out of it, where we don't want to take really nice flour and make an edible out of it. If that's what we got to do.
Kind of a waste.
And you can make a lot of edibles out of a little bit of flour too. So again, it's where's the future going with this? And the big boys, I think, are going to have the vape and the edible markets, the drink lines, those kind of things, because they can grow at scale a lower grade product and make a better product out of them. That's not what we're trying to do. We want to step aside of that market completely and just really focus on the craft and the higher end, sun grown flower, the experience, the higher end experience, I guess.
Yeah. And that brings me to, I remember many times somebody would come to me and be like, I want to use cannabis for whatever reason, but it wasn't quite working for them. And sometimes they would have a bag of stuff and they would dump it in front of me. And I'd ask them, well, what happened? And they would just look at me really frustrated. They'd be like, I don't know. All I know is it didn't work the way I wanted it to. And so going back to what you're saying with the instant gratification and us being overstimulated by everything in the world, cannabis in many ways is a call to grounding. And that's what I would, I always talked about that in my classes. This is a moment to take a deep breath and, really look at the fact that everything we put in our bodies creates a reaction, whether it's what we're eating or smoking or what have you. And so I would always really encourage people to, take a dry hit of that joint that you've rolled to really experience it before you burned it. If you're taking an edible or whatever it is that you're taking, make note of what it is. Be cognizant of your dosage, and then make notes of what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, what you wish would have happened, so that you give yourself credit for knowing much more about what's going on in your body than you may have if you were rushing through life. And I think that cannabis is a great way to start that grounding process. And when we're looking at craft cannabis, it's an even more pronounced opportunity to tap into that.
Yep.
And the subtleties with the differences between, the race to the top with the highest THC, which may not be what it is that you need. And quite honestly, I think in many cases it isn't, because I've had some very low THC flowers that have had a very interesting spectrum of terpenes and other minor cannabinoids that has been much more satisfying than something that's high octane. And that's something you see more in a sun-grown experience, having that full spectrum effect. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to that.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at, if it's a 34% THC strain and you have less than 1% terpenes, what's your total cannabinoid profile really looking like? What's it going to do for you? And versus right now, we pheno hunted an in-house genetic last year. It was just the peanut butter breath cross our wild berry pie. We're calling it peanut butter and jelly. It tested at 30% THC, which is not our goal, but it tested at 30, but it had 4% terpenes, and it had, 6 predominant terpenes that were coming through. And so each one of those terpenes is going to give you an offset. It's going to give you a little more balance. It's going to come down to the entourage effect, right? You really want to know what essential oils are in that plant. And that's going to dictate whether you're sitting on the couch, whether, you're at the office getting whatever you need to get done, whether you're, picking up a guitar and feeling like, you found your muse and you got something new to say and it's going to come out through musically. It comes down to the, for us, it's the flavors. It's the whole basis around the entourage effect, and that's the terpenes. And, if you're using heavy chemicals, you're going to dampen that. If you're not curing right, you're going to dampen that. If you're, if you're indoor, it's going to dampen all these things. When you look at the lab test results of, 5 different strains that are all grown with the same salt-based, chemical input, they're not that far apart. It's actually pretty boring. It really is. You gotta have something unique to it. And diversity in terpenes. That's my main thing. I'm going to say diversity in terpenes. And it doesn't have to be 4% terpenes. It can be 2% terpenes, just diversity in terpenes. If you're just having trouble sleeping and you want something, super high octane, as far as knock you down, don't look for the 34% THC. Look for something that's extremely high in myrcene, or linalool, and, something that's going to help you actually chill and relax. If lavender tea can help you relax, then find that terpene in cannabis.
I love linalool, by the way. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just go for the high THC, you could end up wide awake, with your eyes wide open. You're just oh boy.
Sour lemon mac. That's yes. Yeah, we're gonna get some of that for Jeff. That is, and it's almost too wiry for me. I'm and to be honest, I'm a lightweight with cannabis. I really am. I'm a lightweight with most things. Psychedelics, those type of things. I'm a lightweight, which, it's good to be a cheap date sometimes, but
I agree. And if you weren't cultivating, you'd be saving a lot of money in your cannabis purchases.
Yes, absolutely. But the sour lemon mac, it's energetic, it's focusing, it's engaging people. they don't just sit back on the couch and feel like they have to, kind of zone out in the corner and be on their own, and so that's my go-to. I like to mix it with CBD. I like to do 50-50 blends, and Willie Nelson's 90th birthday down in LA. There was a big 20-gram doobie going around backstage, and that's exactly what that was. That was the sour lemon mac with CBD cross. It was our 14-1 abacus, and we love Margot for that. But Margot Price, she took that back and had back on the red carpet with Woody and Billy Strand and everybody and Bobby, everybody got them all going, and the smiles and the engagement. If you look at all the pictures from that, the engagement, all those musicians,
everyone's having a good time.
They're having a good time. They're staying engaged. They're, nobody's slumping back to the fence and getting out of sight. And it was like, yes, that's exactly what you want to see. And that was kind of across the board with a bunch of different people. So I love seeing that.
And the CBD means no wild eyes.
Yes.
Like, oh, I did too much.
Yeah, no, it can definitely grab you by the back of the face and give you the jitters a little bit, like you had too much coffee. So it's moderation, everything in moderation. You don't got to smoke the whole joint.
No. Yeah, just a little bit will do you sometimes. But that, I think, is one of the things so many people have said to me. I used to love smoking. Now all this stuff is just too crazy. I can't handle it. And that's the one thing that I always mention to people. Add a little CBD to the mix. But that's another thing with the retail environment is that I'm noticing that at a lot of places, not all, but a lot of them, there is not much CBD rich flower to be found, and there has to be that opportunity for people to have a more mellow experience.
Sure.
I mean, if if somebody has an unsatisfying experience, you may have lost that person for life, and they've lost the opportunity to find something that works well for their body.
Just like going to a restaurant, you have a bad meal, how soon are you coming back?
Right.
Okay. That's you got it's a finicky market. Because if they have a bad experience with your brand, there's 9,000 on the shelf right next to you that they can move on to.
Yeah.
And I think we've been seeing, and unfortunately we're seeing some of that with a lot of the like the celebrity endorsed stuff, because the celebrity doesn't really have control over production, right? They're just licensing their names out to things. So but the QC isn't there. It's just kind of a cookie cutter. Okay, indoor weeds going into this, and it's chemical, and it's not cured properly, and so the satisfaction isn't aligning with what the brand statement's supposed to be. It's got to be more authentic. You have to have authenticity to those names, and I think that got lost coming out of the gates. And I think we're going to see like kind of a California legalization 2.0. I think we're going to have this giant implosion of money, and people are going to go, okay, what happened? What did not work and why, and what is working and why? How are these few farms still left up in the hills? How come they survived this? Yeah,
and that's something that I wonder too, because with all the policy stuff that's going on, that's incredibly expensive and raises the bar for entry. And I'm not talking in a quality way, I'm talking in a monetary way. It just takes a lot of money to keep going. What are some of the things that we could change in California to make it easier? Because I know there's a lot of expenses, and a lot of our listeners are not in the industry, so they don't understand that what they're purchasing at the dispensary at what price, it's a very small portion that actually go to the people responsible for crafting these flowers.
Absolutely. I mean, if we get, $8 to $11 an eighth, we're lucky. Really, I mean that's $8.
And I've heard less.
Yeah, and that's saying if we're lucky, and that's co-branded stuff. If we're just white labeling into somebody else's brand, less. But to where we're at now, 7 years in, a lot of the legacy operators that are here have already spent the money to get their mitigation that the environmentalists, like the agencies, want from us. Their roads upgraded, their water storage upgraded, their culverts and those kind of things. But these are things that are not being implemented down in the farmland, the prime ag, Salinas and Santa Barbara, because they didn't have to. It was just taking over one crop to another. We're out here in the middle of the forest. They are putting beyond forest practice rules. Timber operators have fewer regulations than we do.
That blows my mind.
It really, and it's insane. It really is. But the money's been spent. I mean, there's very little that we're having to keep up on now, because the last 7 years they've had boxes we've had to check, and time frames we've had to pay that in and get these work completed. So most of the stuff is behind everybody. But it broke a lot of people. It sent a lot of people packing. And there's also a lot of the bad operators that didn't want to contend with that. They didn't have the heart in it because they saw the money was going away. So they didn't have the passion. They didn't have the love for the land. So when they walk away from something like that, what are the green rush legacies going to, what's that legacy going to look like in the future? Well, I'll tell you, it's plastics left in the forest. It's pesticides left in the forest. It's garbage left in the forest. I myself, we did a property cleanup next door to us. It was 16,000 pounds of trash and plastic, on our own, out of pocket. Our excavator, my dump trailer, many trips to town. The agencies don't pat you on the back for that. They don't say good job. They just expect it to be done again. Mm-hmm. There's very little attaboys coming out of the agencies right now. It's kind of like they just look at the few of us that are left as, well, somebody's got to pick up this mess. It might as well be you. You're still in business. You must have some money.
That makes me think of something. I think what would be really wonderful is for the farmers who are stewards of the land and are helping to remediate the damage that was done by people who came in the green rush. Wouldn't it be something if the state did something to encourage that and to actually give some money back?
And there's grants that have come out from Fish and Wildlife. There's different stipulations. Your canopy has to be a certain size. Mm-hmm. Hey, we'll pay for these culverts to be installed. Or we'll help with, whatever, stream restoration, these type of things. Unfortunately, it was stemmed from, hey, we have all these provisional licenses in the state that haven't met their annual criteria. Let's get these guys licensed so we can move forward, because there's all these people that are just kind of hanging out. Well, what was really happening was those of us that were on our game that wanted to be in here got our shit done early. And we pulled the money out of our pocket and we got the work done. We checked the boxes. And a lot of the people that were dragging their feet are now getting funded to play catch up. So those of us that were, and a lot of them are going under anyway, even after they get the money. So a lot of us that have really struggled financially because we had to spend $100,000 on upgrading pipes and, $400,000 on water tanks or whatever they required from each individual farm, because every farm's story is different, because there's different problems with each property. Well, the money's going to people that didn't really want to get the work done. There's a few operators that definitely just that needed it and they're going to be here, but the majority, no. And so it's an unfair kind of balance. Like, they saw the problem, but the way they came at it with the funding wasn't correct. We couldn't say, hey, look, we have these receipts. Look at all this work we did. Can we get rebated? That was a no-go.
See, and I think it should be. I mean, it's kind of too little too late with that. We know that the small craft farmers have had a really hard time. There's been a lot of things that have come into play that are making it hard for small business in general to weather the storm of this very nascent industry. Because even though people have been cultivating cannabis for millennia, the legalization effort is in the very beginning stages. And you and I, 20 years from now, need to get back together and have a conversation on what things are looking like. But for those who are listening, what are things that they can do to support their small craft farmers?
And this is I'm going to say this for any legal state, because I know Oregon's got some struggles going right now. Washington, is ask for us. Ask for, when you go to your favorite dispensary, instead of you changing your habits, wherever you go to shop, say, who do you carry that's sun grown? What do you know about them? Ask the questions. How do they grow my flower? What's their backstory? Is this a multi-state operator? How are they funded? Who's behind them? Is there anybody behind them? Is it a small family, true small family farm? How do I support that? Verify testing too. Verify testing. Let's definitely get in that, because there's all sorts of testing issues going on right now. And if they want to do their research, everybody's on social media until the algorithm says otherwise. Sorry, Johnny. Our friend Huckleberry Hill's battling some things with his account right now. But look us up, ask questions, talk to us direct. We would love to steer you in the right direction. And it's not just self-promotion. It's, we're not in competition with our neighboring farms. We are all in this together. And when the craft market is realized nationwide, when those federal walls finally come down, there will not be enough craft cannabis coming out of Humboldt County or Mendo or the Emerald Triangle or, Santa Cruz and to supply the nation or the world. So it's going to be a sought after thing. And I believe that. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but we're not in competition together, with each other. We're in this together. It's very, very, very synergetic. I've met some great people and have new friendships since legalization because of that synergy and finding people with the same ethos and the same visions. And, I think that's kind of how we ended up meeting,
absolutely. I mean, that's when we started having the conversations, it was about like the fact that all these amazing farmers work together and support one another. And even the collabs that you've done it's wonderful because as everything has come out of the shadows, we're realizing that we're stronger together. And there have been some beautiful relationships that are coming out of this. So those of you out there, choose your cannabis that's made with love. If you want a satisfying experience, you want something that's full of flavor, aroma, and that the nuances of effects, don't go for something that is almost made in a factory. Go for something that you can actually know your farmer.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, and if there's events going on, if you're in California and there's a cannabis event and you see us, come talk to us. We do a lot of stuff with Tina from Moon Maid, and we just did a collaboration with her, and it's our wild berry pie and her sapphire Sue. It's a CBD mix, and it's very light and it's engaging. It's a daytime smoke. It's not heavy. And she's all over the place. She's an amazing farmer. She's an amazing woman. And what they're doing down there, it's all good things. I mean, just, as you see small craft farms at events, just come up and talk to them, learn more. That's, you got to have that engagement, and we're definitely all ears, and we're willing to talk to whoever, we'll talk to whoever will listen at this point. We're like, hey, we're here. This is what we're doing. We hope you like it because we're doing it for you.
Yeah. I mean, get in on the best kept secret that shouldn't be secret any longer. And for people who want to follow you on social media and see pictures of your farm and what you're doing, how do they do that?
We're on Instagram, just at Full Moon Farm 707. It's a lifestyle site. It's not all cannabis. We're going to show you what we like to do on our days off when we have them, which haven't been many lately. But just getting out into nature and family stuff and musical events. We definitely like giving our support back to the musical community and compassionate care and all of that. And so we like to try to highlight all those things.
I definitely, before I came up, I followed you on social media, and I loved all the pictures. It's just so wonderful. And it's for those of you, it's more than cannabis. It's culture. It
is culture.
It all comes together. Nik, I just want to thank you for inviting us to your farm on this beautiful day and for the great conversations. And I feel like we have a lot of good things to come as long as we all work together and make it happen.
All right. So are you volunteering to help with harvest? Is that what that means?
Maybe not this year. How about next year?
Okay. Official taste tester, please.
Exactly. No. I'm not too bad at the trim.
Okay. Oh, that's my worst. You're in.
Thank you, my friend.
All right. Thank you. Absolutely. Anytime.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Payan on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.